I'll wash your mother, and she'll walk. The Mafia boss thought it was a bad joke. Dante Wellington, 35, stood in the driveway of his stone mansion in a suit so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. His posture was controlled, his face unreadable, the kind of stillness that made grown men choose their words carefully. Dante didn't raise his voice often. He didn't need to. In his world, silence could be a sentence. Behind him, a luxury car sat parked like a loyal animal, polished and waiting. A couple of men lingered near the gate, quiet, watchful, hands loose at their sides. They weren't there to guard the house from strangers. They were there to guard the world from Dante. But right now, none of that mattered. Because on the spotless lawn, bordered by manicured hedges and rows of white, red and pink roses, sat his 78-year-old mother, Catherine, in a wheelchair. Her hair, silver white and neatly pulled back, was being drenched. A maid was doing it. Grace, the new maid in her late 20s, wore a black dress with a crisp white collar, a white apron, and a small white headpiece. Her grip on the garden hose was steady. The stream of water hit Catherine's head and ran down her forehead, soaking her cardigan, dripping onto her lap like someone had decided dignity was optional. Dante's lungs locked. Then his temper erupted. "What are you doing?" he shouted, storming across the grass. Grace didn't jump, didn't apologize, didn't turn the hose away like she'd been caught. She just kept spraying, as calm as if she were watering flowers. "I'm washing your mother," Grace said evenly, "and when I'm done, she's going to walk." Dante reached for the hose. "Are you insane?" His voice cracked with fury he couldn't fully control. "My mother hasn't walked in 12 years. She's paralyzed from the waist down." He yanked. Grace held firm. "I spent fortunes. Specialists flown in from everywhere. Therapies, machines, procedures, treatments, things you've never even heard of. Nothing worked." Grace finally looked at him. Her eyes were steady, not defiant, just certain, like she wasn't impressed by money, fear, or the reputation that followed him like a shadow. "All those doctors treated her body," she said. "None of them treated her mind." "That's nonsense," Dante snapped. "They all said the same thing. Permanent damage. No recovery." Grace lowered the hose slightly, letting the water move from Catherine's hair to her shoulders, not stopping, just shifting. "When was the last time any of those experts actually examined her?" Dante's anger stalled. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He searched his memory, hospital corridors, cold rooms, paperwork, signatures, hopeless conversations, then years of simply managing, making sure she was fed, cared for, comfortable, making sure the house stayed quiet, making sure she never cried where he could hear it. 6 years ago, he admitted, jaw tight. Maybe 7. Grace's expression didn't change, but her words hit harder than any threat. "So for 6 years, nobody checked if anything changed. You accepted what they said when she was freshly injured, and you called it mercy." "I didn't give up," Dante said quickly, like the words could erase the truth. "I gave her everything. The best chair, the best nurses, the best care." "Comfort," Grace repeated, as if the word had teeth. Not challenge, not pressure, not a reason for her body to wake up. She turned to Catherine, lowering her voice. "Mrs. Wellington, when they bathe you, do they use warm water?" Catherine nodded softly. "Always." Dante insists. "And do they touch your legs gently?" Grace continued. "Like you might break?" Catherine nodded again, slower this time, as understanding began to creep into her eyes. Grace tightened her grip on the hose. "That's the problem." Grace lifted the hose slightly and let the stream hit Catherine's legs through the fabric of her clothes. "This is cold," she said. "Shocking! Your nervous system can't ignore it." Dante's men near the gate shifted subtly, watching the way predators watch a strange new animal. Dante didn't notice them. His attention was locked on his mother's face. On the way, her calm expression had started to crack. "That's not how paralysis works," Dante said, but his tone had lost some of its bite. Doubt had slipped in like a blade under a door. Grace didn't argue like someone trying to win. She spoke like someone stating a fact. "For 12 years, your mother has been handled like glass. Warm water, soft hands, quiet voices, no pressure, no demand. Her body learned one thing: stay asleep." Catherine's hands tightened on the arms of the wheelchair. Grace crouched beside her, still holding the hose. "Mrs. Wellington, I want you to focus, not on what you believe you should feel, not on what you've been told you can't feel. Focus on what's happening right now." Catherine closed her eyes. Water splashed over her shins, cold enough to make Dante's skin prickle just watching it. Her mouth opened slightly. She swallowed. There's something," Catherine whispered. Dante leaned forward. "What?" "It's faint," she said, voice trembling, as if she were afraid of her own words. "Like tingling, like a small buzz under the skin." Dante's heart punched his ribs. "That's impossible." Grace's eyes didn't leave Catherine. "It's not impossible, it's quiet. It's been quiet for a long time, and nobody asked her to listen." She shut the water off and looked up at Dante. "Come here." Dante hesitated. In his world, people came to him, not the other way around. But he stepped closer anyway, boots sinking slightly into the perfect grass. Grace took his hand, bold, unapologetic, and placed it on Catherine's left leg, just above the knee. "Press," Grace said, "not gently, hard." Dante stared at her. "You want me to hurt her?" "I want you to stop treating her like she's already gone," Grace replied. "Press." Dante pressed. Catherine gasped like someone pulled her back from underwater. Her eyes flew open, wide and wet. "I felt that," she whispered. Dante's hand froze in place. "You... what?" His voice broke around the words. "I felt it," Catherine said again, stronger. "Right there. Pressure." Dante's throat tightened. A heat rose behind his eyes that made him furious. At himself, at the world, at every expensive expert who had spoken over his mother like she was a file folder, instead of a human being. Grace stood, wiping water from her hands. Those doctors probably read the old reports, saw the initial damage, and stopped looking. People see what they expect to see. Nobody expected healing, so nobody searched for it. Dante shook his head as if shaking it could reset reality. "I was protecting her." Grace's voice softened, but it didn't spare him. "You were burying her alive with comfort." Catherine's fingers trembled on the wheelchair arm. "She's right," she said quietly. Dante's gaze snapped to her. "Mom." "I felt little things for years," Catherine admitted. "Small sparks, flickers, but I didn't say anything." Her voice cracked. "I was afraid. If it was nothing, if I got your hopes up and disappointed you again." Dante dropped to his knees in front of her. His expensive suit didn't matter now. Grass stained it. Water soaked it. He grabbed her hands like he was terrified she'd vanish. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I should have kept trying." Catherine touched his cheek, gentle and certain. "You did what you knew how to do. But now, we do something different." Grace extended both hands toward Catherine. "I'm going to count to 3, Grace said, "and you're going to try to stand." Catherine's face went pale. "What if I can't?" "Then we try again tomorrow," Grace said simply. "And the next day, and the next." Catherine let out a shaky laugh. Small, real. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's find out." Grace nodded. "Ready?" Catherine gripped the arms of the chair until her knuckles turned white. Dante held his breath. Grace began to count. 1, Grace said, steady as a metronome. Catherine's shoulders tightened. Her lips pressed together, eyes locked forward like she was staring down something bigger than fear. 2. Dante's palms were sweating. He didn't wipe them. He didn't blink. He watched his mother the way he'd watched enemies across a table, waiting for the moment everything changed. 3. Catherine pushed. Her arms shook violently. The muscles in her neck tensed. Her face twisted with effort that looked painful, raw, and honest. For a second, nothing happened. Just strain and breath and the cruel weight of 12 years. And then, her body rose. Not much, only a few inches off the seat. But it was real. Her legs trembled like they were learning the idea of strength again. She held it for a heartbeat, maybe 2, then collapsed back into the chair, gasping like she'd just climbed a mountain. Silence fell hard. Catherine began to cry. Not quiet tears, not polite tears. She sobbed like someone who'd been locked away and suddenly saw daylight. She whispered. I did it. Dante's chest felt too small for his heart. He covered his mouth with one hand, eyes burning, and the other hand gripped the wheelchair arm as if he needed it to stay standing. Grace didn't celebrate yet. She didn't let the moment drift into disbelief. Again, she said immediately. Right now, before fear takes over. Catherine looked up, terrified. I don't know if... Yes, Grace said. Not harsh, not loud, just certain. Again. Catherine inhaled shakily, braced her hands, and pushed. This time she held it longer. 4 seconds, maybe 5. Her knees shook, her legs quivered, but she didn't drop immediately. Grace held her hands, giving just enough support to stop a fall, not enough to do the work. Dante whispered like a prayer. Mum. Catherine dropped back again, panting, eyes wide. I felt it, she said through tears. I felt my legs trying. Grace nodded. Good. 1 more. They did it again. 6 seconds. Again. 8. Again. 10. By the time the sun began sliding lower, painting the lawn in gold, Catherine could lift herself and stay up for 15 seconds while Grace steadied her grip. Dante's men near the gate had stopped pretending they weren't watching. One of them rubbed his arms, unsettled, like he'd seen something he couldn't explain. Another stared at Dante, at the ruthless boss on his knees in wet grass, like he'd never truly known him. Dante didn't care. All he saw was his mother, shaking, sweating, crying, laughing in little broken bursts between attempts. On the 5th try, Catherine stayed standing for 30 seconds. Stop, Dante blurted suddenly. Panic flashed across his face. That's enough for today. You'll hurt her. Grace turned her head toward him slowly. You're scared, she said, like she could see through skin. Not of pain, of hope. Dante swallowed hard. I can't watch her break again. Grace's voice softened. She's been broken for 12 years. This is her returning. Catherine looked at Dante then, really looked at him, and her gaze was stronger than it had been in years. Let me try, she said fiercely. Please. Dante's throat tightened. He nodded once, as if agreeing to something dangerous. Grace stepped back a little and opened her hands. 1 more time, she said to Catherine. But this time, you take a step. Dante's head snapped up. A step? That's too much. Catherine's eyes flashed. I can do it! Grace moved 2 feet away from the wheelchair, creating a small gap that suddenly looked enormous. 1 step, Grace said. From the chair to me. You will not fall. Trust me. Catherine's breath hitched, then she nodded. I trust you. Dante's heart hammered like a warning drum. Catherine pushed herself up, her legs held. She stood, standing without the wheelchair holding her. She lifted her right foot a few inches forward and placed it down. Dante let out a sound that wasn't a word, half sob, half disbelief. You're doing it, he whispered, voice shaking. Catherine lifted her left foot. Her whole body wobbled, but she steadied herself, face tight with concentration. She placed the foot down. 2 steps. Grace's eyes shone. 1 more. Catherine lifted her right foot again, and the world seemed to pause with it. Catherine's right foot hovered for a second, trembling like it didn't trust the ground anymore. Dante's breath stopped in his throat. Every part of him wanted to rush forward, to catch her before she fell, to control the outcome, the way he controlled everything else in his life. But Grace's eyes locked onto his. One sharp look that said, "Don't steal this from her." Catherine lowered her foot. It landed, firm. 3 steps. 3 impossible steps. The strength left her all at once, like a candle going out after burning too bright. Her body pitched forward, and Grace caught her cleanly, arms wrapping around her as Catherine laughed and sobbed at the same time. Dante lunged in, wrapping them both in his arms. The 3 of them sank onto the grass, soaked and shaking, surrounded by roses that suddenly looked less like decoration and more like witnesses. Dante's voice came out rough. "How did you know?" he demanded, choking on the words. "How did you know she could do that?" Grace wiped her face with the back of her hand. Her breathing was heavy too, not from effort, but from emotion she'd held back like it was a rule. "Because I've been where she is," Grace said quietly. Dante pulled back just enough to stare at her. "What?" Grace's gaze didn't drop. 7 years ago, I was in a wheelchair. Her voice stayed steady, but something in her eyes shifted. Memory, pain, survival. "A spinal injury, they told me it was permanent." Dante blinked, trying to make the pieces fit. "You were paralyzed?" "For 3 years," Grace said. "I accepted it. Everyone around me accepted it. They wrapped me in careful hands and warm water and soft voices." She gave a humorless smile. It felt like kindness. It was a cage. Catherine looked up at Grace, tears still on her cheeks. "What changed?" "A therapist who didn't treat me like I was fragile," Grace answered. "He shocked my system awake. Cold water, pressure, hard work, and no permission to quit." She glanced at Catherine's legs like she was speaking directly to them too. "He told me something I never forgot. Sometimes the body follows the mind. Sometimes the mind follows the body. But if both are asleep, you have to wake one up." Dante stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not a maid, not staff, not someone hired to stay invisible. A survivor. Grace rose, brushing grass from her dress. "Your mother will walk with a cane in months," she said, matter of fact, like she was announcing tomorrow's weather. Dante almost laughed, except he couldn't stop crying. He turned to Catherine, who was touching her own legs with wonder, as if they belonged to a stranger she'd just met. Catherine looked at him and whispered, "Dante, I forgot what it felt like to try." Dante's hand shook as he held her face. "I won't let you forget again," he said, voice low and fierce. The promise sounded like the kind he made in his darker business, except this one saved instead of ruined. Grace picked up the hose and coiled it with practiced care. "That's why I took this job," she said. "Not for the money, not for the mansion." She nodded toward Catherine. "To help people remember they're not broken, just neglected in the places that matter." Dante swallowed hard. "Name your price." Grace met his gaze. "Let me keep working with her. That's enough." 4 months later, Catherine walked into Dante's private office with a cane in her hand and her head held high. His men, hardened, loyal, dangerous, stood straighter like they'd just seen a ghost choose life. Dante crossed the room in 2 steps and held her like she was the only thing real. He promoted Grace on the spot, officially making her Catherine's full-time rehabilitation specialist, with pay high enough that nobody could ever dismiss her as just a maid, again. And every Sunday after that, they sat together in the garden surrounded by roses, Catherine's cane resting against the chair, Grace sipping tea, Dante quieter than he'd ever been. Remembering the day a garden hose proved that miracles don't always come from power. Sometimes they come from someone who refuses to let you stay asleep.